Every great story needs something missing. A wound that hasn't healed, a question that hasn't been answered, or a trophy that has never been lifted. Portugal have won the European Championship. They won the National League twice. They've produced players that have lit up every club in the world, and they have stood on the highest stages the game has to offer. But the World Cup has never been theirs. Not once, not in 60 years of trying, not through golden generations, through world-class squads, through heartbreak, hope, and everything in between. This is the story of a nation chasing the one thing it never had, and the man who has carried that weight longer than anyone ever before. Welcome to the World Cup Chronicles. To understand what the World Cup means to Portugal, we have to go back to 1966. Because this is where the dream was born, but also when it first was broken. Eusébio da Silva Ferreira arrived at the tournament as one of the most electric players in the world. Born in Mozambique, raised on the streets of Maputo, he had been discovered as a teenager and brought to Lisbon, where at Benfica he had become something the world had never quite seen before. A striker of ferocious speed and a right foot that could tear through any defense. They called him the Black Panther. And in 1965 he won the Ballon d'Or as the best player in the world. And in his career he scored over 600 goals. And he was the kind of player that arrives only once. And in 1966, at Portugal's first ever World Cup appearance in England, he dragged them to the brink of the world. Here they beat Hungary, they beat Bulgaria, they beat the reigning champions Brazil with Pele in the team. And they did so with Eusébio orchestrating everything. And in the quarterfinals they came up against North Korea, finding themselves 3-0 down. Here the dream looked all but over. But up stepped their great player Eusébio. And in one of the greatest individual World Cup performances, he scored 4 goals. 4. Single-handedly dragging Portugal back into the game where they eventually won it 5-3. A nation that has never been on this stage before are suddenly now in the semi-finals. Here they come up against the host in England in front of 93,000 fans at Wembley Stadium, and they lost 2-1. And when the final whistle blew, the cameras panned over to Eusébio, and they caught him with tears streaming down his face as he walked off the pitch. And that image became one of the most defining images of the tournament. The man that had given everything on the pitch, but it was not enough. And understanding that in that moment, this chance might never come again. And Eusébio was right. That chance never came again. Because Portugal did not qualify for the World Cup in 16 years. And by that time, Eusébio's time had passed. And in 2014, he passed away as the greatest player his nation had ever produced, but never holding the trophy that mattered the most. And that wound never closed, it was just passed on to the next one. Cristiano Ronaldo was born in Funchal, on the island of Madeira, the fourth and youngest child of a gardener and a cleaning woman. His father battled alcoholism his entire life, traumatized by the combat he'd seen in the Portuguese colonial war, and even his own mother admitting that she thought about not going through with his pregnancy. They lived in a small house, where Cristiano would share his room with his siblings, and the only thing he could do was play football, barefoot on the streets. But at 12 years old, he left the island, he left his home, he left his family and everything he knew to join Sporting's football academy. And in Lisbon, he was mocked for his Madeiran accent, often crying himself to sleep at night. But he trained, and he trained so hard and so long that coaches had to physically stop him from training. But at 15 years old, doctors discovered a rare heart condition. This racing heart condition could end his potential career before anything had even started. But he had the surgery and eventually he was back in training. "I don't mind people hating me," he once said, "because it pushes me." And nothing has pushed him harder than the World Cup trophy. He has scored more international goals than any player in history. He has won 5 Ballon d'Ors in his career. He has conquered England, Spain and Italy, the 3 most difficult leagues in Europe. And along the way, breaking records many people will say would be impossible to break. And still, at 41 years old, he's still playing in Saudi Arabia, scoring goals for Portugal, helping them qualify for the World Cup, and still ever hunting and refusing to stop. But despite his hunting, despite all of his hard work, the World Cup has never come. And this might be his last time. Because while in 2006 he was the young star of the team, they reached the semifinals only to be knocked out by France. And in 2010, Portugal went out to the eventual winners in Spain. In 2014, they crashed out in the group stages. And in 2018, Ronaldo, with one of the greatest individual performances, scored a hat-trick against Spain. But it was not enough, because Portugal was eliminated in the round of 16. And in 2022, he started on the bench in the quarterfinals, and they lost. And Cristiano Ronaldo wept. The closest he ever came to feeling what a world title would feel like was in Euro 2016. And even that was agony before joy. Because in that final against France, he had to be stretched out after only 25 minutes. Tears running down his face, knee all bandaged up, and the dream apparently over. But what happened next is the stuff of legends. Instead of disappearing into the dressing room, Ronaldo stepped out. He appeared right after halftime, limping the technical area, urging his teammates, shouting and pointing. His teammate Pepe gathered the squad together. When Cristiano said that he could not go on, I told everyone we have to win it for him. And in the 109th minute, substitute Eder scored the final goal, and Portugal were the European champions. Ronaldo stood on the pitch, bare-chested, with tears running down his face. But different tears this time. And he lifted the trophy with a broken leg. And he has been chasing the next one ever since. This World Cup will be his last. At 41 years old, everybody knows it. And deep down, he knows it as well. There is no next time. There is no next cycle. No promise of another chapter. This is the final one. And Cristiano Ronaldo has lived his entire life refusing to let the final chapter be won without victory. When Roberto Martinez took charge of Portugal in January 2023, he inherited the weight of Eusébio's tears, Ronaldo's relentless hunger, and a nation that had been waiting for 60 years. But it also inherited something else: criticism. Because Martinez was an unusual choice, a Spanish-born manager with no real connection to Portugal. And his previous job as a national team manager ended in humiliation with Belgium. Critics lined up immediately, where one prominent Portuguese footballing figure bluntly stated, he was born in Spain, he worked in England and failed at Belgium, and he has no reason to be here at Portugal. Martinez ignored it all, and he set about building something, not something built around just the one player or one philosophy, but around a collective. And he guided Portugal to their fastest ever qualification to a major tournament. And in June in 25, he guided Portugal to the Nations League title, beating Spain in the final. And here, slowly and patiently, the outsider had suddenly become the right man. Because that squad that he has assembled and at his disposal is quite extraordinary. Because just that midfield alone of Bruno Fernandes, Vitinha, Bernardo Silva, or even João Neves is quite extraordinary. These are 4 players that could start for any nation in the world, but they all wear the same jersey. And up front, Rafael Leao brings that electrifying pace and joyous skill from AC Milan. Gonçalo Ramos brings that finishing and power from Paris Saint-Germain. At the back, you have a leader and experienced player in Ruben Dias and an exciting talent in Nuno Mendes. So this squad is not just Cristiano Ronaldo and 10 other players. This is one of the more deepest and complete Portugal squads in recent times. But talent without a trophy is just potential, and Portugal has had plenty of potential before. But the story of this Portuguese national team is not just about what they are chasing, it's also one of what they are carrying. On the 3rd of July in 2025, less than 1 month after helping Portugal win the Nations League, less than 2 weeks after marrying his partner of 10 years, Diogo Jota and his brother Andre passed away in a car crash in Spain. He was just 28 years old at the time, leaving behind his family of his wife and 3 children, and his whole life ahead of him. The last image the world of football has of Diogo Jota is him in a Portugal shirt smiling, holding the Nations League trophy with number 21 on his back. And when the Portugal national team reconvened for the first time in their qualifying after Jota's passing, Martinez addressed the situation before anything else happened. He said that the team won the Nations League, and Jota was part of that victory. He built this dressing room. He's a strength for us now. He wanted to win the World Cup, and there is no greater motivation than keeping his spirit alive. In the match that followed, João Felix scored, and he held up the number 21 to the sky. Portugal will go to this World Cup carrying something that cannot be measured in stats or tactics. They will carry a name, they will carry a number, and a promise to a man that cannot be there to fulfill it himself. So what would it mean, and I mean truly mean, if Portugal won this World Cup? It would mean that the wound that opened in 1966 finally healed. That Eusébio's tears at Wembley was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning of it. That 60 years of near misses and heartbreaks and golden generations that just fell short were not failures, but just a price to get there. Would mean that Cristiano Ronaldo, the boy from Madeira who almost was never born, who had to cry himself to sleep in Lisbon, had heart surgery to even continue his football career, gets the ending that his story deserves. And not because he deserves another trophy, because no other footballer has so visibly wanted it for so long and still kept on going for it. And it would mean that somewhere in a locker room in North America, before the final whistle blows, someone will look at the shirt with number 21 that they've carried through the entire tournament and know that they did it. For Eusébio, for Ronaldo, and for Jota, for Portugal. The most beautiful story in football is one that has been 60 years in the making, and it is not finished yet.